I found out the day after our 8th anniversary. The kind of day where the air feels still, too quiet, like even the world itself doesn't want to be the one to tell you the truth. Her coffee cup was still warm on the counter. Mine had gone. Cold. I hadn't touched it. I just sat there, staring at the doorway, knowing she wouldn't come back through it. Not like before. You don't expect the end of your marriage to come with the sound of a gate clicking shut. But that's how it happened. She left quietly. No tears, no yelling. Just a bag already packed and a message on my phone that read, "Please don't come looking for me. I'm okay." She left me for our neighbor. I suppose I could have handled it like a man, whatever that means. But I didn't. I broke, silently, in slow motion, in ways that wouldn't show on my face but would echo in my ribs for months. She didn't just walk out of my life, she walked straight into someone else's arms, and the worst part, he lived right across the goddamn street. Brandon, the neighbor with the perfectly trimmed hedges, a black Labrador named Hank, and a smile like he knew something you didn't. I never liked him. Something about him always felt too practiced, too neat. But I never imagined she'd fall for him, not her, not Claire. We used to make fun of guys like Brandon, the cliché single guy with the gym body, the tan, the expensive grill. The man who always seemed to be standing in his driveway, shirtless, pretending to wash his car. She called him Ken once, laughed about how he probably waxed his chest. But here we are, and maybe I deserved it. Maybe I was too focused on work, too emotionally distant. I know I pulled away after we lost the baby. I know that. I can still hear the silence of that hospital room, the way she wouldn't look at me, the way I didn't know how to hold her grief, so I left her alone in it. Maybe she started disappearing then, and maybe I didn't stop her. But Brandon, I thought. That was the twist, the heartbreak, the betrayal, but it wasn't. That was just the setup, because about 3 weeks after she left, someone slid a letter into my mailbox. No return address, just my name. Inside, a photo. It was old, grainy, printed on matte paper, but I'd recognize that smirk anywhere. Brandon, younger, shirtless again, but he wasn't in a driveway, he was in a mugshot. There was something in his eyes, cold, hollow, predatory, and written on the back of the photo in small typewritten letters were 5 words she has no idea yet. I stared at that photo for what felt like an hour, hands trembling, heart thudding in my throat like a warning drum I couldn't ignore. I flipped it over again, rereading the words, as if a second glance might change them. She has no idea yet. There was no signature, no number, just that line, and the silence that followed me for the rest of the night. I barely slept. I couldn't. My mind kept looping the same questions. Who sent this? What the hell did Brandon do? What kind of past are we talking about? The next morning I searched his name online. Brandon Cole Whitaker. Nothing. No mugshots. No arrest records I could find. No red flags. Either he'd buried his past well, or someone else had buried it for him. I thought about calling Claire, warning her, begging her to come back. But something held me back. Something cold, and sharp, and quiet inside me. The truth is, I wanted her to see it for herself, to see who she'd left me for. Over the next few days, I watched them, quietly, from my living room window, through the slit in the curtains. Brandon mowing the lawn, Claire hanging up lights on his porch, them laughing, kissing, like nothing was wrong, like everything was just beginning. But I began to notice things. Small things. Subtle. Claire started looking tired, pale. Her smiles shorter, less real. She checked her phone more often. Once I saw her sitting on the porch alone, elbows on her knees, staring down the street. Not at anything in particular, just staring. Then, one night, I heard it. They were arguing. It wasn't loud. Not a screaming match. But the kind of fight where words cut deeper than volume ever could. I couldn't hear the exact sentences, but her tone, sharp, afraid, disbelieving, clawed at my insides. I pressed closer to the window. She stormed out onto the porch, phone in hand, pacing in small, frantic circles. He followed her seconds later. Calm, controlling, leaning against the doorframe like nothing could touch him. She stopped pacing, said something. He smiled, and not the charming neighborly smile he wore during barbecues. This one was colder, crooked, like a man who had just won a bet no one else knew was happening. That night, I had a dream, one I'd forgotten I used to have after the miscarriage. Claire standing at the edge of a cliff, holding something fragile in her hands. In the dream, I always ran toward her, yelling for her to stop. And just as I got close, she would drop whatever it was and step off the edge. Only this time, Brandon was behind her, whispering in her ear. I woke up gasping. That was when I knew I couldn't just sit and watch anymore. Whatever Brandon had done, whoever he had been, was still there, beneath the surface, waiting. And if Claire didn't see it yet, I had to, even if it broke me. I started keeping a notebook, not to be obsessive, though maybe I was, but I needed to track what I was seeing, just to prove to myself that I wasn't losing it, that this gnawing feeling in my gut had roots in reality. Tuesday, 6:13 p.m. Claire leaves in his truck, returns alone 2 hours later. She looks shaken, doesn't speak to him on the porch. He's on the phone, laughing. Friday, 10:02 a.m. Brandon loads something into the back of his SUV, a box, heavy, wrapped in black plastic. He looks around before putting it in, drives off without her. Sunday, 3:27 p.m. Claire sitting in the backyard alone, crying, buries something in the flower bed. I can't see what. These weren't smoking guns, not yet. But they weren't normal either, and Claire, she was changing, every day becoming more withdrawn. She avoided her old friends, deleted her Instagram, the glow she used to carry, the one that lit rooms when she walked in. It was gone. I knew that glow. I fell in love with it. And now it was flickering out. I kept thinking about the photo, that mugshot, that smirk, that cold look in his eyes. I had started to wonder if I'd ever actually seen Brandon's real face. Or had he always been performing? One night, I was organizing files in the garage, trying to find a distraction, something to ground me. And I stumbled across an old shoebox tucked beneath the Christmas decorations. Inside, Polaroids, movie stubs, and letters. Ones Claire had written me over the years. There was one in particular, folded into quarters, stained with what looked like coffee. No envelope. It was dated 3 months before she left. You haven't touched me in weeks. Not really. I know you're hurting, but you've built a wall so high I can't even find the door anymore. Sometimes I think you don't love me anymore. Or maybe you do, but you love your grief more, and I'm scared. Scared I'll disappear right in front of you and you won't even notice. I sat there shaking. She had warned me. She had begged me, and I hadn't listened. But this wasn't just about pain anymore. This was about danger. Something was wrong over there, deeply wrong. And Claire, she didn't even seem to realize she was sinking into it. The next morning, I saw her walking, Hank down the street. She wasn't wearing makeup, hair tied back, thin sweatshirt, loose joggers. She looked hollow, like someone whose soul had been scraped clean. As she passed my house, she glanced up. Our eyes met. Just for a second. And that's when it happened. She smiled, not at me, but like someone remembering something that didn't hurt yet. It was faint, fragile, and then it was gone. But in that moment, I remembered something else. A flash from 2 years ago. A night when she came home late from work, face pale, hands trembling. She'd told me she was just tired, that a client had been aggressive, but now I saw that expression again, on her face now. The same mask of someone keeping something locked away. The kind of mask you wear when the truth would ruin everything. And I had the sickening realization that maybe Brandon wasn't just her escape, maybe he was her prison. The next day, I called in sick to work for the first time in years. Not because I was sick, not in the traditional sense, but because something inside me had snapped into stillness, into a kind of focused silence I hadn't felt since my father died. There's a moment when pain becomes something else, when it stops screaming and starts whispering. And in that whisper, you hear what you need to do. I drove into town, not to follow her, not to confront him, to find out who the hell he really was. I started at the county courthouse. They didn't have anything under his name. No arrest records. No licenses. Nothing older than 6 years. That in itself was strange. People leave trails, even the clean ones. Brandon was spotless. Too spotless. I asked about archived records from other states. They pointed me toward a public terminal in the back, where dust and silence settled in layers. It took hours. Names, dates, combinations, cross-referencing databases, tracing the smallest leads. And then, finally, something broke loose. A Brandon. C. Whitaker, from Minnesota, a sealed case file from 2009, juvenile court. No details. I felt a chill rush down my spine. Minnesota wasn't mentioned on his job application when I hired him to help me with the fence years ago. He told me he grew up in Nevada, said his mom passed when he was a teenager. He'd looked me dead in the eyes. He'd lied. When I returned home, dusk was bleeding into the sky. Claire's silhouette moved behind the blinds across the street, alone again. I didn't turn on any lights. I sat in the dark and thought. If the court had sealed his file, it meant it was serious and probably violent. They only do that for minors if the charge is traumatic enough to haunt a record forever. Assault, abuse, worse. But what chilled me the most was this. If Brandon had taken Claire away from me, what might he be capable of doing to her? I had to be careful. Quiet. One wrong move and she'd run again. Or he'd shut her down completely. Or, worse. That night, I did something I never thought I'd do. I followed him. He left the house at 11:12 p.m., alone. No gym bag, no dog. Just his keys and a small duffel slung over one shoulder. I tailed him in silence, keeping distance. He drove. Out of town, past the gas station, past the last stoplight, into the woods. He parked at a rundown cabin. No lights, no sound, just trees and rot and night. He didn't go in right away, just stood there for a moment, staring at the door. Then he opened the duffel bag and pulled out a lockbox. Metal. Heavy. Dented. He opened the cabin and disappeared. Inside. I waited in the car. 10 minutes, 15, 20, then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You're getting too close. My blood turned to ice. I looked around. No lights, no other cars. Just the forest and the dark. I drove home in silence, adrenaline crashing like waves against my chest. When I got back, Claire's house was dark. The porch light was off. But as I passed by, I saw something tucked into the edge of my front door. Note. Folded once, inside, written in the same handwriting I hadn't seen since she left. I need help, please, but don't let him know you're helping me. I read that note 5 times before I let myself breathe again. She was in danger, not emotionally, not metaphorically, but actually in danger. And she was reaching out to me. There was a strange ache in that moment, not just fear or urgency, but something almost sacred. She trusted me again, after everything I'd failed to do, after everything I didn't say when I should have, and now I had a chance to make it right. The next morning, I waited, watched. Brandon left around 6:30, gym bag in hand, like clockwork, predictable, cocky. It was how people got sloppy. The moment, he was out of sight. I crossed the street and knocked twice, softly. Claire opened the door like she'd been standing behind it the whole time. Her eyes were sunken. Skin pale. She'd lost weight. But it was her voice that hit me hardest. It wasn't hers anymore, not the one I knew. Come in, she whispered, glancing over her shoulder like he might burst out of the closet. She didn't cry. That was the first sign. Trauma that deep. It dries your tears, leaves behind something sharper. She told me everything in fragments, that Brandon had started changing a few weeks after she moved in. First, it was possessiveness, subtle. Then came isolation, control, gaslighting. He tells me what I meant, even when I know what I said, she said. I asked about the cabin, about the lockbox, her face turned to stone. I'm not supposed to know, she said. He told me if I ever followed him out there, he'd disappear, and I'd disappear too. That night, I pulled every string I had. Called an old friend from college who worked in private investigations. Gave him Brandon's fake info and the Minnesota lead. By morning, he had more. The sealed file was for sexual coercion and unlawful confinement. The victim, a girl named Riley. Age, 14. Brandon had been 17. He was tried as a minor, sent to a juvenile facility, and released at 21 with a new name and state relocation. Full legal identity restructured. He'd done it before. Now he was doing it again, but worse, and Claire. Claire was already too deep in it. I knew we had to be smart. A frontal confrontation wouldn't work. If we accused him too early, he'd vanish, and he was dangerous enough to leave blood behind if cornered. So we planned. Claire installed a fake app on her phone, one that looked like a meditation timer, but recorded audio whenever the screen was off. Over the next few days, she captured hours of conversation, the verbal abuse, the threats. One night, even a half-confession about what happened in Minnesota. We built a case, carefully. My PI friend advised us on every step. The goal wasn't just to expose him, the goal was to trap him. The final piece came on a Thursday. Claire told Brandon she wanted to reconnect at the cabin, said she had a surprise for him, a dress he'd always liked. He bought it. She planted a tiny tracker in his bag. We followed him together, me and my friend, with 2 deputies from the local sheriff's office waiting 5 minutes behind. Inside the cabin, she kept him talking, calm, manipulative. She said things she didn't mean, laughed like she still loved, and then she asked, "Did you ever think about Riley?" The room went quiet. He froze, looked at her. "What did you say?" Claire smiled, like she was handing him the rope to his own noose. "You said you never meant for it to go that far. That's what you told me. Right?" That was when the officers burst in, and Brandon ran. He didn't make it far. When they tackled him outside, he screamed, not angry but unhinged, like someone whose entire illusion had just been shattered in full daylight. And Claire, she just stood at the porch, still, silent, watching the man she'd chosen instead of me dragged away, in handcuffs. The days that followed felt like living in the aftermath of a storm no one else had seen. Neighbors whispered. Police cars came and went. Brandon's name hit the local news. Man with sealed record arrested in domestic abuse and fraud investigation. But no one really understood how close they'd been to him. How close he'd gotten to destroying someone without ever leaving a mark that bled. Claire stayed in my guest room, not because we were together, but because she had nowhere else to go. She moved like glass, delicate, slow, almost afraid of sound. The dog followed her everywhere, as if he too had sensed what we'd all ignored. I made breakfast every morning. Didn't ask questions, didn't try to fix her, just existed near her, present, quiet. Still. One evening after dinner, she sat across from me, mug in hand, staring into the steam. "I used to think love was supposed to be loud," she said. "Like fireworks, heat, obsession." She paused. "But I think the loudness was always just fear dressed up in red flags." I nodded. Not because I fully understood, how could I? But because she needed someone to nod, someone who wouldn't turn her words into a mirror of their own pain. "I don't know who I am anymore," she whispered. "You don't have to yet," I said. "You just have to make space to find out." That night, I sat on the porch alone, watching her through the window, curled on the couch with Hank's head on her lap. She was finally asleep, and it hit me. I didn't want her back because I missed her, not just because I loved her. I wanted her to be okay, even if that meant never calling me her home again. Weeks passed. The charges stuck. Minnesota opened an old investigation. Brandon's plea deal was revoked. He was facing decades. Claire slowly began to come back to life, a new kind of life. Not the version of her I remembered, but a wiser, quieter version. One who smiled carefully, trusted less, and stood a little straighter every time she said, "No." Eventually, she moved into her own apartment. We still talk. Sometimes we walk Hank together. Sometimes we share memories like pages from a book we once read together, now tucked safely on a shelf. She never apologized for leaving me, and I never asked her to. Some wounds aren't about blame. They're about time, growth, truths we weren't ready to face back then. As for me, I forgave myself for being blind, for being silent, for not protecting her from something I didn't see coming. And maybe that's the most honest ending love can have. Not reunion, but respect. Not a kiss, but peace. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for your time. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel. It really helps. Click the video on the screen, and I'll see you there.